But even if we knew the simplified form for every word in the language, the phonographic alphabet would still beat the simplified speller, hands down, in the important matter of economy of labor. I will illustrate. Present form, through Laugh Highland. Simplified form, through Laugh Highland. Phonographic form. To write the word through, the pen has to make 21 strokes. To write the word through, the pen has to make 12 strokes, a good saving. To write that same word with the phonographic alphabet, the pen has to make only 3 strokes. To write the word laugh, the pen has to make 14 strokes. To write laugh, the pen has to make the same number of strokes. No labor is saved to the penman. To write the same word with the phonographic alphabet, the pen has to make only 3 strokes. To write the word Highland, the pen has to make 22 strokes. To write Highland, the pen has to make 18 strokes. To write that word with the phonographic alphabet, the pen has to make only 5 strokes. To write the words phonographic alphabet, the pen has to make 53 strokes. To write phonographic alphabet, the pen has to make 50 strokes. To the penman, the saving in labor is insignificant. To write that word, with vowels with the phonographic alphabet, the pen has to make only 17 strokes. Without the vowels, only 13 strokes. The vowels are hardly necessary this time. We make 5 pen strokes in writing an M thus: a stroke down, a stroke up, a second stroke down, a second stroke up, a final stroke down. Total 5. The phonographic alphabet accomplishes the M with a single stroke, a curve, like a parenthesis that has come home drunk and has fallen face down right at the front door where everybody that goes along will see him and say, alas. When our written M is not the end of a word, but is otherwise located, it has to be connected with the next letter, and that requires another pen stroke, making 6 in all, before you get rid of that M. But never mind about the connecting strokes. Let them go. Without counting them, the 26 letters of our alphabet consumed about 80 pen strokes for their construction, about 3 pen strokes per letter. It is 3 times the number required by the phonographic alphabet. It requires but 1 stroke for each letter. My writing gait is, well, I don't know what it is, but I will time myself and see. Result, it is 24 words per minute. I don't mean composing, I mean copying. There isn't any definite composing gait. Very well, my copying gait is 1440 words per hour, say 1500. If I could use the phonographic character with facility, I could do the 1500 in 20 minutes. I could do 9 hours copying in 3 hours. I could do 3 years copying in 1 year. Also, if I had a typewriting machine with the phonographic alphabet on it, oh, the miracles I could do. I am not pretending to write that character well. I have never had a lesson, and I am copying the letters from the book. But I can accomplish my desire, at any rate, which is, to make the reader get a good and clear idea of the advantage it would be to us if we could discard our present alphabet and put this better one in its place, using it in books, newspapers, with the typewriter, and with the pen. Man, dog, horse. I think it is graceful and would look comely in print. And consider once more, I beg, what a labor-saver it is. 10 pen strokes with the one system to convey those 3 words above, and 33 by the other. I mean, in some ways, not in all. I suppose I might go so far as to say in most ways, and be within the facts, but never mind. Let it go at some. One of the ways in which it exercises this birthright is, as I think, continuing to use our laughable alphabet these 73 years, while there was a rational one at hand, to be had for the taking. It has taken 500 years to simplify some of Chaucer's rotten spelling, if I may be allowed to use so frank a term as that, and it will take 500 more to get our exasperating new simplified corruptions accepted and running smoothly. And we shan't be any better off then than we are now. For in that day, we shall still have the privilege the simplifiers are exercising now. Anybody can change the spelling that wants to. But you can't change the phonographic spelling, there isn't any way. It will always follow the sound. If you want to change the spelling, you have to change the sound first. Mind, I myself am a simplified speller. I belong to that unhappy guild that is patiently and hopefully trying to reform our drunken old alphabet by reducing his whiskey. Well, it will improve him. When they get through and have reformed him all they can by their system, he will be only half drunk. Above that condition, their system can never lift him. There is no competent, and lasting, and real reform for him, but to take away his whiskey entirely, and fill up his jug with Pitman's wholesome and undeceased alphabet. One great drawback to simplified spelling is that in print a simplified word looks so like the very nation, and when you bunch a whole squadron of the simplified together the spectacle is very nearly unendurable. The demais of cours come when the public maybe expect to get reconciled to the bizarre aspect of the simplified combinations, but, if I may be allowed the expression, is it worth the wasted time? To see our letters put together, in ways to which we are not accustomed offends the eye, and also takes the expression out of the words. Lawn Macduff, and damned be he who first cries hold enough. It doesn't thrill you as it used to do. The simplifications have sucked the thrill all out of it. But a written character with which we are not acquainted does not offend us. Greek, Hebrew, Russian, Arabic, and the others, they have an interesting look, and we see beauty in them too. And this is true of hieroglyphics as well. There is something pleasant and engaging about the mathematical signs when we do not understand them. The mystery hidden in these things has a fascination for us. We can't come across a printed page of shorthand without being impressed by it and wishing we could read it. Very well, what I am offering for acceptance and adoption is not shorthand, but longhand, written with the shorthand alphabet unreduced. You can write 3 times as many words in a minute with it as you can write with our alphabet. And so, in a way, it is properly a shorthand. It has a pleasant look, too, a beguiling look and inviting look. I will write something in it, in my rude and untaught way. Even when I do it, it comes out prettier than it does in simplified spelling. Yes, and in the simplified it costs 123 pen strokes to write it, whereas in the phonographic it costs only 29. Is probably. Let us hope so, anyway. As concerns interpreting the deity. 1. This line of hieroglyphs was for 14 years the despair of all the scholars who labored over the mysteries of the Rosetta Stone. After 5 years of study, Champollion translated it thus. Therefore let the worship of Epiphanes be maintained in all the temples, this upon pain of death. That was the 24th translation that had been furnished by scholars. For a time it stood, but only for a time. Then doubts began to assail it and undermine it, and the scholars resumed their labors. 3 years of patient work produced 11 new translations. Among them, this, by Grunfeld, was received with considerable favor. The horse of Epiphanes shall be maintained at the public expense, this upon pain of death. But the following rendering, by Господин, was received by the learned world with yet greater favor. The priest shall explain the wisdom of Epiphanes to all these people, and these shall listen with reverence, upon pain of death. 7 years followed, in which 21 fresh and widely varying renderings were scored, none of them quite convincing. But now, at last, came Rawlinson, the youngest of all the scholars, with a translation which was immediately and universally recognized as being the correct version, and his name became famous in a day. So famous, indeed, that even the children were familiar with it, and such a noise did the achievement itself make that not even the noise of the monumental political event of that same year, the flight from Elba, was able to smother it to silence. Rawlinson's version reads as follows. Therefore, walk not away from the wisdom of Epiphanes, but turn and follow it. So shall it conduct thee to the temple's peace, and soften for thee the sorrows of life and the pains of death. Here is another difficult text. It is demotic, a style of Egyptian writing, and a phase of the language which had perished from the knowledge of all men 2,500 years before the Christian era. Our red Indians have left many records, in the form of pictures, upon our crags and boulders. It has taken our most gifted and painstaking students 2 centuries to get at the meanings hidden in these pictures, yet there are still 2 little lines of hieroglyphics among the figures, grouped upon the Dighton rocks, which they have not succeeded in interpreting to their satisfaction. These. The suggested solutions of this riddle are practically innumerable. They would fill a book. Thus we have infinite trouble in solving man-made mysteries. It is only when we set out to discover the secret of God that our difficulties disappear. It was always so. In antique Roman times, it was the custom of the deity to try to conceal his intentions in the entrails of birds, and this was patiently and hopefully continued century after century, although the attempted concealment never succeeded, in a single recorded instance. The augurs could read entrails as easily as a modern child can read coarse print. Roman history is full of the marvels of interpretation which these extraordinary men performed. These strange and wonderful achievements move our awe and compel our admiration. Those men could pierce to the marrow of a mystery instantly. If the Rosetta Stone idea had been introduced, it would have defeated them, but entrails had no embarrassments for them. Entrails have gone out, now entrails and dreams. It was at last found out that as hiding places for the divine intentions, they were inadequate. A part of the wall of valetry having in former times been struck with thunder, the response of the soothsayers was, that a native of that town would some time or other arrive at supreme power. Bones Suetonius, p. 138. Some time or other. It looks indefinite, but no matter, it happened, all the same. One needed only to wait and be patient and keep watch, then he would find out that the thunderstroke had Caesar Augustus in mind and had come to give notice. There were other advance advertisements. One of them appeared just before Caesar Augustus was born and was most poetic and touching and romantic in its feelings and aspects. It was a dream. It was dreamed by Caesar Augustus's mother and interpreted at the usual rates. Asia, before her delivery, dreamed that her bowels stretched to the stars and expanded through the whole circuit of heaven and earth. Suetonius, p. 139. That was in the augur's line, and furnished him no difficulties. But it would have taken Rawlinson and Champollion 14 years to make sure of what it meant, because they would have been surprised and dizzy. It would have been too late to be valuable then, and the bill for service would have been barred by the statute of limitation. In those old Roman days, a gentleman's education was not complete until he had taken a theological course at the seminary and learned how to translate entrails. Caesar Augustus's education received this final polish. All through his life, whenever he had poultry on the menu, he saved the interiors and kept himself informed of the deity's plans by exercising upon those interiors the arts of augury. In his first consulship, while he was observing the auguries, 12 vultures presented themselves, as they had done to Romulus. And when he offered sacrifice, the livers of all the victims were folded inward in the lower part, a circumstance which was regarded by those present who had skill in things of that nature as an indubitable prognostic of great and wonderful fortune. Suetonius, p. 141. Indubitable is a strong word, but no doubt it was justified if the livers were really turned that way. In those days, chicken livers were strangely and delicately sensitive to coming events, no matter how far off they might be, and they could never keep still, but would curl and squirm like that, particularly when vultures came and showed interest in that approaching great event and in breakfast. Chapter 2. We may now skip 1130 or 40 years, which brings us down to enlightened Christian times and the troubled days of King Stephen of England. The augur has had his day and has been long ago forgotten. The priest had fallen heir to his trade. King Henry is dead. Stephen, that bold and outrageous person, comes flying over from Normandy to steal the throne from Henry's daughter. He accomplished his crime, and Henry of Huntingdon, a priest of high degree, mourns over it in his chronicle. The Archbishop of Canterbury consecrated Stephen, wherefore the Lord visited the Archbishop with the same judgment which he had inflicted upon him who struck Jeremiah the great priest. He died within a year. Stephen's was the greater offense, but Stephen could wait, not so the Archbishop apparently. The kingdom was a prey to intestine wars. Slaughter, fire and rapine spread ruin throughout the land. Cries of distress, horror, and woe rose in every quarter. That was the result of Stephen's crime. These unspeakable conditions continued during 19 years. Then Stephen died as comfortably as any man ever did and was honorably buried. It makes one pity the poor archbishop, and wish that he, too, could have been let off as leniently. How did Henry of Huntingdon know that the archbishop was sent to his grave by judgment of God for consecrating Stephen? He does not explain. Neither does he explain why Stephen was awarded a pleasanter death than he was entitled to, while the aged King Henry, his predecessor, who had ruled England 35 years to the people's strongly worded satisfaction, was condemned to close his life in circumstances most distinctly unpleasant, inconvenient, and disagreeable. His was probably the most uninspiring funeral that is set down in history. There is not a detail about it that is attractive. It seems to have been just the funeral for Stephen, and even at this far distant day, it is matter of just regret that by an indiscretion the wrong man got it. Whenever God punishes a man, Henry of Huntington knows why it was done and tells us, and his pen is eloquent with admiration. But when a man has earned punishment and escapes, he does not explain. He is evidently puzzled, but he does not say anything. I think it is often apparent that he is pained by these discrepancies, but loyally tries his best not to show it. When he cannot praise, he delivers himself of a silence so marked that a suspicious person could mistake it for suppressed criticism. However, he has plenty of opportunities to feel contented with the way things go. His book is full of them. King David of Scotland, under color of religion, caused his followers to deal most barbarously with the English. They ripped open women, tossed children on the points of spears, butchered priests at the altars, and cutting off the heads from the images on crucifixes, placed them on the bodies of the slain, while in exchange they fixed on the crucifixes the heads of their victims. Wherever the Scots came, there was the same scene of horror and cruelty: women shrieking, old men lamenting, amid the groans of the dying and the despair of the living. But the English got the victory. Then the chief of the men of Lothian fell, pierced by an arrow, and all his followers were put to flight. For the Almighty was offended at them, and their strength was rent like a cobweb. Offended at them for what? For committing those fearful butcheries? No, for that was the common custom on both sides, and not open to criticism. Then was it for doing the butcheries under cover of religion? No, that was not it. Religious feeling was often expressed in that fervent way all through those old centuries. The truth is, he was not offended at them at all. He was only offended at their king, who had been false to an oath. Then why did not he put the punishment upon the king instead of upon them? It is a difficult question. One can see by the chronicle that the judgments fell rather customarily upon the wrong person, but Henry of Huntington does not explain why. Here is one that went true. The chronicler's satisfaction in it is not hidden. In the month of August, Providence displayed its justice in a remarkable manner. For two of the nobles who had converted monasteries into fortifications, expelling the monks, their sin being the same, met with a similar punishment. Robert Marmion was one, Godfrey de Manville the other. Robert Marmion, issuing forth against the enemy, was slain under the walls of the monastery, being the only one who fell, though he was surrounded by his troops. Dying excommunicated, he became subject to death everlasting. In like manner, Earl Godfrey was singled out among his followers, and shot with an arrow by a common foot soldier. He made light of the wound, but he died of it in a few days, under excommunication. See here the like judgment of God, memorable through all ages. This exaltation jars upon me, not because of the death of the men, for they deserved that, but because it is death eternal in white-hot fire and flame. It makes my flesh crawl. I have not known more than 3 men, or perhaps 4 in my whole lifetime, whom I would rejoice to see writhing in those fires for even a year, let alone forever. I believe I would relent before the year was up, and get them out if I could. I think that in the long run, if a man's wife and babies, who had not harmed me, should come crying and pleading, I couldn't stand it. I know I should forgive him and let him go, even if he had violated a monastery. Henry of Huntington has been watching Godfrey and Marmion for nearly 750 years, now, but I couldn't do it, I know I couldn't. I am soft and gentle in my nature, and I should have forgiven them 77 times long ago. And I think God has, but this is only an opinion and not authoritative, like Henry of Huntington's interpretations. I could learn to interpret, but I have never tried. I get so little time. All through his book, Henry exhibits his familiarity with the intentions of God, and with the reasons for his intentions. Sometimes, very often, in fact, the act follows the intention after such a wide interval of time that one wonders how Henry could fit one act out of 100 to one intention out of 100, and get the thing right every time when there was such abundant choice among acts and intentions. Sometimes a man offends the deity with a crime and is punished for it 30 years later. Meantime, he has committed a million other crimes. No matter, Henry can pick out the one that brought the worms. Worms were generally used in those days for the slaying of particularly wicked people. This has gone out now, but in old times it was a favorite. It always indicated a case of wrath. For instance, the just God avenging Robert Fitzhildebrand's perfidy, a worm grew in his vitals, which gradually gnawing its way through his intestines fattened on the abandoned man, till, tortured with excruciating sufferings, and venting himself in bitter moans, he was by a fitting punishment brought to his end. p. 400. It was probably an alligator, but we cannot tell. We only know it was a particular breed, and only used to convey wrath. Some authorities think it was an ichthyosaurus, but there is much doubt. However, one thing we do know, and that is that that worm had been due years and years. Robert F. had violated a monastery once. He had committed unprintable crimes since, and they had been permitted, under disapproval. But the ravishment of the monastery had not been forgot nor forgiven, and the worm came at last. Why were these reforms put off in this strange way? What was to be gained by it? Did Henry of Huntingdon really know his facts, or was he only guessing? Sometimes I am half persuaded that he is only a guesser, and not a good one. The divine wisdom must surely be of the better quality than he makes it out to be. 500 years before Henry's time, some forecasts of the Lord's purposes were furnished by a pope, who perceived, by certain perfectly trustworthy signs furnished by the deity for the information of his familiars, that the end of the world was about to come. But as this end of the world draws near, many things are at hand which have not before happened, as changes in the air, terrible signs in the heavens, tempests out of the common order of the seasons, wars, famines, pestilences, earthquakes in various places, all which will not happen in our days, but after our days all will come to pass. Still, the end was so near that these signs were sent before, that we may be careful for our souls, and be found prepared to meet the impending judgment. That was 1300 years ago. This is really no improvement on the work of the Roman augurs. Concerning tobacco. Written about 1893, not before published. As concerns tobacco, there are many superstitions, and the chiefest is this, that there is a standard governing the matter, whereas there is nothing of the kind. Each man's own preference is the only standard for him, the only one which he can accept, the only one which can command him. A congress of all the tobacco lovers in the world could not elect a standard which would be binding upon you or me, or would even much influence us. The next superstition is that a man has a standard of his own. He hasn't. He thinks he has, but he hasn't. He thinks he can tell what he regards as a good cigar from what he regards as a bad one, but he can't. He goes by the brand, yet imagines he goes by the flavor. One may palm off the worst counterfeit upon him. If it bears his brand, he will smoke it contentedly and never suspect. Children of 25, who have 7 years of experience, try to tell me what is a good cigar and what isn't. Me, who never learned to smoke but always smoked. Me, who came into the world asking for a light. No one can tell me what is a good cigar for me. I am the only judge. People who claim to know say that I smoke the worst cigars in the world. They bring their own cigars when they come to my house. They betray an unmanly terror when I offer them a cigar. They tell lies and hurry away to meet engagements, which they have not made when they are threatened with the hospitalities of my box. Now then, observe what superstition, assisted by a man's reputation, can do. I was to have 12 personal friends to supper one night. One of them was as notorious for costly and elegant cigars as I was for cheap and devilish ones. I called at his house, and when no one was looking borrowed a double handful of his very choicest cigars, which cost him 40 cents apiece and bore red and gold labels in sign of their nobility. I removed the labels and put the cigars into a box with my favorite brand on it, a brand which those people all knew, and which cowed them as men are cowed by an epidemic. They took these cigars when offered at the end of the supper, and lit them and sternly struggled with them, in dreary silence, for hilarity died when the fell brand came into view and started around. But their fortitude held for a short time only. Then they made excuses and filed out, treading on one another's heels with indecent eagerness, and in the morning when I went out to observe results, the cigars lay all between the front door and the gate. All except one. That one lay in the plate of the man from whom I had cabbaged the lot. 1 or 2 whiffs was all he could stand. He told me afterward that some day I would get shot for giving people that kind of cigars to smoke. Am I certain of my own standard? Perfectly. Yes, absolutely. Unless somebody fools me by putting my brand on some other kind of cigar, for no doubt I am like the rest, and know my cigar by the brand instead of by the flavor. However, my standard is a pretty wide one, and covers a good deal of territory. To me, almost any cigar is good that nobody else will smoke, and to me, almost all cigars are bad that other people consider good. Nearly any cigar will do me, except a Havana. People think they hurt my feelings when they come to my house with their life preservers on, I mean, with their own cigars in their pockets. It is an error. I take care of myself in a similar way. When I go into danger, that is, into rich people's houses, where in the nature of things they will have high-tariff cigars, red and gilt-girded and nested in a rosewood box along with a damp sponge. Cigars which develop a dismal black ash and burn down the side and smell, and will grow hot to the fingers, and will go on growing hotter and hotter, and go on smelling more and more infamously and unendurably the deeper the fire tunnels down inside below the thimbleful of honest tobacco that is in the front end. The furnisher of it praising it all the time and telling you how much the deadly thing cost. Yes, when I go into that sort of peril I carry my own defense along. I carry my own brand, 27 cents a barrel, and I live to see my family again. I may seem to light his red-gartered cigar, but that is only for courtesy's sake. I smuggle it into my pocket for the poor, of whom I know many, and light one of my own. And while he praises it I join in, but when he says it cost 45 cents I say nothing, for I know better. However, to say true, my tastes are so catholic that I have never seen any cigars that I really could not smoke, except those that cost $1 apiece. I have examined those and know that they are made of dog hair, and not good dog hair at that. I have a thoroughly satisfactory time in Europe, for all over the continent one finds cigars which not even the most hardened newsboys in New York would smoke. I brought cigars with me, the last time. I will not do that any more. In Italy, as in France, the government is the only cigar peddler. Italy has 3 or 4 domestic brands: the Minghetti, the Trabuco, the Virginia, and a very coarse one which is a modification of the Virginia. The Minghettis are large and comely and cost $3.60 a hundred. I can smoke 100 in 7 days and enjoy every one of them. The Trabucos suit me too, I don't remember the price. But one has to learn to like the Virginia, nobody is born friendly to it. It looks like a rat-tail file but smokes better, some think. It has a straw through it, you pull this out and it leaves a flue, otherwise there would be no draft, not even as much as there is to a nail. Some prefer a nail at first. However, I like all the French, Swiss, German, and Italian domestic cigars, and have never cared to inquire what they are made of, and nobody would know anyhow perhaps. There is even a brand of European smoking tobacco that I like. It is a brand used by the Italian peasants. It is loose and dry and black and looks like tea grounds. When the fire is applied it expands and climbs up and towers above the pipe, and presently tumbles off inside of one's vest. The tobacco itself is cheap, but it raises the insurance. It is, as I remarked in the beginning, the taste for tobacco is a matter of superstition. There are no standards, no real standards. Each man's preference is the only standard for him, the only one which he can accept, the only one which can command him. The bee. It was Maeterlinck who introduced me to the bee. I mean, in the psychical and in the poetical way. I had had a business introduction earlier. It was when I was a boy. It is strange that I should remember a formality like that so long. It must be nearly 60 years. Bee scientists always speak of the bee as she. It is because all the important bees are of that sex. In the hive there is one married bee, called the queen. She has 50,000 children. Of these, about 100 are sons, the rest are daughters. Some of the daughters are young maids, some are old maids, and all are virgins and remain so. Every spring the queen comes out of the hive, and flies away with one of her sons and marries him. The honeymoon lasts only an hour or two, then the queen divorces her husband, and returns home competent to lay 2 million eggs. This will be enough to last the year, but not more than enough, because hundreds of bees get drowned every day, and other hundreds are eaten by birds, and it is the queen's business to keep the population up to standard. Say, 50,000. She must always have that many children on hand and efficient during the busy season, which is summer, or winter would catch the community short of food. She lays from 2,000 to 3,000 eggs a day, according to the demand. And she must exercise judgment, and not lay more than are needed in a slim flower harvest, nor fewer than are required in a prodigal one, or the board of directors will dethrone her, and elect a queen that has more sense. There are always a few royal heirs in stock and ready to take her place, ready and more than anxious to do it, although she is their own mother. These girls are kept by themselves, and are regally fed and tended from birth. No other bees get such fine food as they get, or live such a high and luxurious life. By consequence they are larger and longer and sleeker than their working sisters, and they have a curved sting, shaped like a scimitar, while the others have a straight one. A common bee will sting anyone or anybody, but a royalty stings royalties only. A common bee will sting and kill another common bee, for cause, but when it is necessary to kill the queen other ways are employed. When a queen has grown old and slack, and does not lay eggs enough, one of her royal daughters is allowed to come to attack her, the rest of the bees looking on at the duel and seeing fair play. It is a duel with the curved stings. If one of the fighters gets hard-pressed and gives it up and runs, she is brought back and must try again. Once, maybe twice. Then, if she runs yet once more for her life, judicial death is her portion. Her children pack themselves into a ball around her person and hold her in that compact grip 2 or 3 days, until she starves to death or is suffocated. Meantime, the victor bee is receiving royal honors and performing the one royal function, laying eggs. As regards the ethics of the judicial assassination of the queen, that is a matter of politics, and will be discussed later, in its proper place. During substantially the whole of her short life of 5 or 6 years, the queen lives in the Egyptian darkness and stately seclusion of the royal apartments, with none about her but plebeian servants, who give her empty lip affection in place of the love which her heart hungers for, who spy upon her in the interest of her waiting heirs, and report and exaggerate her defects and deficiencies to them, who fawn upon her and flatter her to her face and slander her behind her back, who grovel before her in the day of her power, and forsake her in her age and weakness. There she sits, friendless, upon her throne through the long night of her life, cut off from the consoling sympathies and sweet companionship and loving endearments which she craves, by the gilded barriers of her awful rank. A forlorn exile in her own house and home, weary object of formal ceremonies and machine-made worship, winged child of the sun, native to the free air and the blue skies and the flowery fields, doomed by the splendid accident of her birth to trade this priceless heritage for a black captivity, a tinsel grandeur, and a loveless life, with shame and insult at the end, and a cruel death, and condemned by the human instinct in her to hold the bargain valuable. Huber, Lubbock, Maeterlinck, in fact, all the great authorities, are agreed in denying that the bee is a member of the human family. I do not know why they have done this, but I think it is from dishonest motives. Why, the innumerable facts brought to light by their own painstaking and exhaustive experiments prove that if there is a master fool in the world, it is the bee. That seems to settle it. But that is the way of the scientist. He will spend 30 years in building up a mountain range of facts with the intent to prove a certain theory. Then he is so happy in his achievement that as a rule he overlooks the main chief fact of all, that his accumulation proves an entirely different thing. When you point out this miscarriage to him, he does not answer your letters. When you call to convince him, the servant prevaricates and you do not get in. Scientists have odious manners, except when you prop up their theory, then you can borrow money of them. To be strictly fair, I will concede that now and then one of them will answer your letter, but when they do they avoid the issue. You cannot pin them down. When I discovered that the bee was human, I wrote about it to all those scientists whom I have just mentioned. For evasions, I have seen nothing to equal the answers I got. After the queen, the personage next in importance in the hive is the virgin. The virgins are 50,000 or 100,000 in number, and they are the workers, the laborers. No work is done, in the hive or out of it, save by them. The males do not work, the queen does no work, unless laying eggs is work, but it does not seem so to me. There are only 2 million of them anyway, and all of 5 months to finish the contract in. The distribution of work in a hive is as cleverly and elaborately specialized as it is in a vast American machine shop or factory. A bee that has been trained to one of the many and various industries of the concern doesn't know how to exercise any other, and would be offended if asked to take a hand in anything outside of her profession. She is as human as a cook, and if you should ask the cook to wait on the table, you know what would happen. Cooks will play the piano if you like, but they draw the line there. In my time, I have asked a cook to chop wood, and I know about these things. Even the hired girl has her frontiers. True, they are vague, they are ill-defined, even flexible, but they are there. This is not conjecture, it is founded on the absolute. And then the butler. You ask the butler to wash the dog. It is just as I say, there is much to be learned in these ways without going to books. Books are very well, but books do not cover the whole domain of aesthetic human culture. Pride of profession is one of the boniest bones in existence, if not the boniest. Without doubt it is so in the hive. Taming the Bicycle. Written about 1893, not before published. In the early 80s, Mark Twain learned to ride one of the old high-wheel bicycles of that period. He wrote an account of his experience, but did not offer it for publication. The form of bicycle he rode long ago became antiquated, but in the humor of his pleasantry is a quality which does not grow old. ABPI. I thought the matter over and concluded I could do it, so I went down and bought a barrel of Pond's extract and a bicycle. The expert came home with me to instruct me. We chose the backyard, for the sake of privacy, and went to work. Mine was not a full-grown bicycle, but only a colt, a 50-inch, with the pedals shortened up to 48 and skittish, like any other colt. The expert explained the thing's points briefly, then he got on its back and rode around a little to show me how easy it was to do. He said that the dismounting was perhaps the hardest thing to learn, and so we would leave that to the last. But he was in error there. He found, to his surprise and joy, that all that he needed to do was to get me onto the machine and stand out of the way. I could get off myself. Although I was wholly inexperienced, I dismounted in the best time on record. He was on that side, shoving up the machine. We all came down with a crash, he at the bottom, I next, and the machine on top. We examined the machine, but it was not in the least injured. This was hardly believable. Yet the expert assured me that it was true. In fact, the examination proved it. I was partly to realize, then, how admirably these things are constructed. We applied some Pond's extract and resumed. The expert got on the other side to shove up this time, but I dismounted on that side, so the result was as before. The machine was not hurt. We oiled ourselves up again and resumed. This time the expert took up a sheltered position behind, but somehow or other we landed on him again. He was full of surprised admiration, said it was abnormal. She was all right, not a scratch on her, not a timber started anywhere. I said it was wonderful while we were greasing up, but he said that when I came to know these steel spiderwebs, I would realize that nothing but dynamite could cripple them. Then he limped out to position, and we resumed once more. This time the expert took up the position of shortstop and got a man to shove up behind. We got up a handsome speed and presently traversed a brick, and I went out over the top of the tiller and landed, head down, on the instructor's back, and saw the machine fluttering in the air between me and the sun. It was well it came down on us, for that broke the fall, and it was not injured. 5 days later, I got out and was carried down to the hospital, and found the expert doing pretty fairly. In a few more days I was quite sound. I attribute this to my prudence in always dismounting on something soft. Some recommend a feather bed, but I think an expert is better. The expert got out at last, brought 4 assistants with him. It was a good idea. These 4 held the graceful cobweb upright while I climbed into the saddle, then they formed in column and marched on either side of me while the expert pushed behind. All hands assisted at the dismount. The bicycle had what is called the wobbles, and had them very badly. In order to keep my position, a good many things were required of me, and in every instance the thing required was against nature. Against nature, but not against the laws of nature. That is to say, that whatever the needed thing might be, my nature, habit, and breeding moved me to attempt it in one way, while some immutable and unsuspected law of physics required that it be done in just the other way. I perceived by this how radically and grotesquely wrong had been the lifelong education of my body and members. They were steeped in ignorance. They knew nothing which it could profit them to know. For instance, if I found myself falling to the right, I put the tiller hard down the other way by a quite natural impulse, and so violated a law and kept on going down. The law required the opposite thing. The big wheel must be turned in the direction in which you are falling. It is hard to believe this when you are told it, and not merely hard to believe it but impossible. It is opposed to all your notions. And it is just as hard to do it, after you do come to believe it. Believing it, and knowing by the most convincing proof that it is true, does not help it. You can't any more do it than you could before. You can neither force nor persuade yourself to do it at first. The intellect has to come to the front now. It has to teach the limbs to discard their old education and adopt the new. The steps of one's progress are distinctly marked. At the end of each lesson he knows he has acquired something, and he also knows what that something is, and likewise that it will stay with him. It is not like studying German, where you mull along in a groping, uncertain way for 30 years, and at last, just as you think you've got it, they spring the subjunctive on you, and there you are. No, and I see now, plainly enough, that the great pity about the German language is that you can't fall off it and hurt yourself. There is nothing like that feature to make you attend strictly to business. But I also see, by what I have learned of bicycling, that the right and only sure way to learn German is by the bicycling method. That is to say, take a grip on one villainy of it at a time, and learn it, not ease up and shirk to the next, leaving that one half learned. When you have reached the point in bicycling where you can balance the machine tolerably fairly and propel it and steer it, then comes your next task: how to mount it. You do it in this way. You hop along behind it on your right foot, resting the other on the mounting peg, and grasping the tiller with your hands. At the word, you rise on the peg, stiffen your left leg, hang your other one around in the air in a general and indefinite way, lean your stomach against the rear of the saddle, and then fall off, maybe on one side, maybe on the other, but you fall off. You get up and do it again, and once more, and then several times. By this time you have learned to keep your balance, and also to steer without wrenching the tiller out by the roots. I say tiller because it is a tiller. Handlebar is a lamely descriptive phrase. So you steer along, straight ahead, a little while, then you rise forward with a steady strain, bringing your right leg, and then your body, into the saddle, catch your breath, fetch a violent hitch this way and then that, and down you go again. But you have ceased to mind the going down by this time. You are getting to light on one foot, or the other with considerable certainty. 6 more attempts and 6 more falls make you perfect. You land in the saddle comfortably next time and stay there. That is, if you can be content to let your legs dangle and leave the pedals alone a while. But if you grab at once for the pedals, you are gone again. You soon learn to wait a little and perfect your balance before reaching for the pedals. Then the mounting art is acquired, is complete, and a little practice will make it simple and easy to you, though spectators ought to keep off a rod or two to one side, along at first, if you have nothing against them.